What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week 27 preview, and I'm going to start off by talking about captaincy. Now, it is a double game week for 4 teams this week: Brighton, Brentford, Crystal Palace and Southampton. So I will almost certainly captain a double game week player, but I know there's a lot of good single game week fixtures as well. So we'll talk about them in a minute. The only way I wouldn't go for a double game weeker is if it looked likely that one of the games in the double could be postponed because of the weather, but I don't think that's likely, and we'll talk about that later on in the video anyway. So this is the list that I've come up with, starting with who I would consider the best, right? Just my opinion. You are absolutely welcome to have a different one. There are 2 players that aren't on this list that people might mention: Zaha for Palace and James Ward-Prowse for Southampton. Now with Palace, their fixtures are Man City at home and Brighton away. That's just not good enough for me to want to captain a player, and I don't think many of you own Zaha anyway. Is there every chance that after game week 27 Zaha ends up the top point scorer? Absolutely, because that's just the kind of player he is, but I wouldn't want to captain him with those fixtures. And with Southampton, the fixtures are slightly better, but they've still got to play Man United away, and I just feel like James Ward-Prowse is too reliant on set pieces, and the fixtures just aren't quite there to captain him. So that's why I've not included them. The reason I've got Tony at the top is because I feel like anytime Brentford score, you feel like he's going to be involved. If he hasn't scored the goal, then he's probably got the assist, and he is their penalty taker as well. Now, I have said in the past, I prefer captaining midfielders where possible, especially ones that are on penalties, and obviously McAllister would fit that criteria. But his expected goal, expected assist numbers are just not as good as Tony's. So without penalties, you just expect Tony to score. If I had to put money right now on one of these players to score a goal in the double, then Tony is going to be the one, which is why I've got him ahead of all the other Brighton midfielders. But it is very close. If you think that Matoma or McAllister or March is a better option, you should absolutely go for them, because it's not a case that Tony is here and Matoma, I'm checking where my hands are on the camera, it's not a case that Matoma, McAllister, etc. are miles behind. It's more like this. It's so close, right? So if you want to go for a Brighton midfielder, do it. Just to answer some other questions that are going to come up, like why did you buy March if you put McAllister ahead? For me, March was a slightly longer term thinking that his expected goal, expected assist numbers are higher, and he's always playing in an attacking position under De Zerbi. With McAllister, he's been playing a lot deeper, but at the moment he's playing as a number 10. Now, do I think we're going to go into double game week 27 and McAllister's going to play both games as a number 10? Probably. Longer term, am I as sure about that? Not necessarily. So this week, I'd probably have him ahead of March. Long term, I'm not so sure. Ultimately, I've got Matoma ahead because I think he's just way more exciting to watch. And when I do watch Brighton games, he always feels like the most likely to assist or score a goal. If you want to go for a different order, you're absolutely welcome. Then I've got Mbommo, and I've got him ahead of the likes of Ward-Prowse or Zaha just because of the fixtures. If Tony did end up suddenly getting banned out of the blue, Mbommo would also be on penalties as well. And I think if you're going to go for a defender, it's probably got to be Estepinian. I think he's the most attacking out of any of the double game week defenders. He should play both games, and again, the fixtures are pretty good. So I've gone for Tony, Matoma, McAllister, March. You can have those 4 in any order you want. It's all very close. Just quickly with the single game week players, Salah's got Bournemouth away, Kane's got Nottingham Forest at home, Haaland is Palace away, Saka's Fulham away, and Rashford Southampton at home. I've probably got Salah top because of a little bit of bias and what he did against Man United, but ultimately Bournemouth is a good game. I actually think they've attacked pretty well the last couple of games, but defensively it's just not there. They conceded 3 to Arsenal, 4 to Man City. Liverpool are definitely capable of doing something similar. Kane I've got ahead of Haaland just because of the fixture, the fact it's a home game and against Nottingham Forest. But I'll be honest, I'm not completely sure about Spurs right now, so you could absolutely flip those 2 around if you wanted to. And similar situation with Saka and Rashford. The reason I've got Saka ahead is because of penalties, and Fulham will be without Paulinho. But on paper, Rashford has definitely got the better fixture. And if you look at his expected goals per 90 compared to Saka, his goal threat's higher as well. So you could flip those 2 around. So this order could absolutely be Salah, Haaland, Kane, Rashford, Saka, right? It's all quite close. But ultimately, I can't believe we've got those 5 good fixtures that have all come about at the same time for 5 very good FPL options, and I'm saying I'm not going to captain anyone or any of them. I'm quite interested to see how this week goes. But going back to the double game weekers, it looks something like this. Right now I'm on Tony. I might switch to Matoma, but I'm not sure I will. I think I'm going to go with the guy that's nailed, absolutely great minutes, good open play goal threat, and on penalties as well. All right, let's answer some of your questions. So are there any Southampton or Crystal Palace players who have a double game week worth considering? And I would say outside of Ward-Prowse or Zaha, probably not. And even with those two, I'm not completely convinced. Like if I look at my current midfield, I've got Odegaard, Saka, March, Matoma and Rashford. And I'm not saying everyone's got the same midfield, but a lot of people will have similar. And I just don't know where I find a spot for a Southampton or Crystal Palace player. And you might turn around and say, well, hang on a second, Zaha and Ward-Prowse have got double game weeks this week, so they're better than Rashford, Saka and Odegaard. And I would absolutely consider that if I was on a free hit. But if I bring one of them in, then not only do I lose a good player, but I've got to use another transfer to get rid of them because I just don't see me holding on to Zaha or Ward-Prowse longer term, even if the fixtures are quite good. And if you look at them for Zaha, for example, the double's not great. City at home, Brighton away. Straight away in 28, they've got to play Arsenal away. And we shouldn't forget, Zaha's nailed when he's fit and he's on penalties as well, unless he keeps missing them, and then who knows. But I don't think that's good enough to bring him in for these next three fixtures. After that, it's actually not that bad. Leicester at home, Leeds away, Southampton away, Everton at home. But again, if you've got Zaha on your midfield, it means you haven't got someone like double Arsenal, Rashford. Some people might be getting Fernandes for the double, maybe getting Salah back, having those two Brighton midfielders. I just don't think it's worth it to swap any of them. If you're on like 4 decent midfielders and you've still got Andreas Pereira, for example, and you've got the money to go to a double game weeker this week, then maybe you could consider that. But for most people, it's just not going to be worth it. And with Southampton, I think it's even worse, to be honest, because you've got a double game week, which is Man United away and Brentford at home. It's not bad, but then you run straight into Spurs at home. Then it's West Ham away. Then it's Man City at home. And in 32, it's Arsenal away. So Southampton's good fixtures aren't really until 33 onwards. And that is just too far away to hold one all the way through. And if you're looking at defenders, like both defences just aren't great this season. And there isn't really any from either team that are so attacking they're worth putting in. Again, ahead of defenders where a lot of people have already got decent ones in their teams, and we've only got 3 forward spots, and I've got Tony, Haaland, Kane. I would consider Ollie Watkins, Iheanacho, maybe Havertz or João Felix from Chelsea. There's quite a few players that you could go for that have a double game week in 29 as well, where I just don't think you're going to be going for the likes of, I don't know, Che Adams and players like that, and a similar situation from Crystal Palace. So honestly, I don't think so. If I was going to get one, then it would be either Ward-Prowse or Zaha. And again, some of you might have a team where you haven't wildcarded yet. You just want to get them in for the double, maybe take them through 28 and then wildcard them out later on. That's perfectly fine. Not everyone's teams are the same. But if you've got a similar setup to me, I just don't see where they come into it. And defenders, goalkeepers and forwards, I just probably wouldn't look at it. I guess if you really wanted a double game week goalkeeper this week because you've got Sanchez and you don't want to go for Steele, you could go for Guaita. That could be an option, but outside of that, I'm struggling for any other players. All right, nice and simple. What should we do with Sanchez? Now, I think for most people, unless you're looking to bench boost in game week 27, you can probably just delay any transfers until double game week 29 and just see what happens with the Brighton goalkeeper situation. And it's not ideal, but you can just play the goalkeeper that's on your bench instead. So you would lose a double game week player, but losing that one fixture to get information in 27 and 28 could be worth it. Because in 27, Brighton have 2 Premier League games. And in game week 28, they blank, but they will play their FA Cup match. And so if Steele ends up playing both games in the league after playing the one against West Ham, and Sanchez plays the FA Cup game, that might then tell you that Steele is the goalkeeper going forward, in which case you can do Sanchez to Steele in double game week 29 instead. If you're desperate to make a goalkeeper move this week, and you've got a free Brentford spot, Raya is probably the safest option. And obviously, if you're bench boosting in 27, he's also got a double game week. You could move to Steele and just assume that he is now the new number 1, but that does come with some risk. De Zerbi has obviously shown he's happy to change the goalkeeper midway through the season, and he could do that again. And it's worth saying that Brighton are quite important to us because they double in 27 and 29, and after that they'll have another 2 to 3 double game weeks. So you don't want to be in a position where you use a transfer to Steele and then use another transfer to go to back to Sanchez or something like that. You could just free up that spot now, go for Raya or someone else, and then just later on get in another Brighton attacker like Evan Ferguson, one of the midfielders, or just get a defender in like Duncan Estepinian and just not worry about what De Zerbi ends up doing with the goalkeepers going forward. So if Steele is the new number 1, he's the obvious choice, right? 4 to 5 double game weeks before the end of the season for 3.9 million. Absolute no-brainer. I just don't think you can say that move it was without risk, because there are definitely some risks there. Outside of that, it really depends on what your kind of chip strategy is and stuff like that. But with David De Gea, if you've got a goalkeeper that plays in 28 where he'll blank, you've got a good single game week fixture this week, a double in 29, and he will probably double in 34 and 37 as well. And the Man United fixtures are quite good until the end of the season. Otherwise, you could look at someone like Nick Pope, who's got good single game week fixture this week and in 28. So depending on what goalkeeper you've already got, you might need Nick Pope for Nottingham Forest away. Double in 29, and he'll also have another double game week before the end of the season as well. He's just a little bit more expensive at 5.4 million, but they're probably the main goalkeepers I would look at. Obviously, Kepa, I guess, is another one as well. Doesn't have any double game weeks on the horizon, but if Man United, has one in 29. If Man United beat Fulham in the FA Cup, he'll also have another one to come as well. And the fixtures in general for Chelsea are fairly good, and they are just a good defence, so you could look at him as well. So a lot will come down to which other goalkeeper you've currently got. I don't think there's a rush to get rid of him, even though you're going to lose one fixture. I almost feel like having that information ahead of 29 might be better. But if you have to go this week, you either take the risk with Steele, you go with Ray with a double, or I guess you could go with Guaita if you wanted to, or you go for a single game week goalkeeper like De Gea, who will have more double game weeks later on. Alright, so is it worth taking a punt on either James or Chilwell? And if you are looking to take a punt in defence, these are both players that I like. It's also worth noting that Graham Potter seems to have gone back to a wing-back system. And when James and Chilwell aren't playing as fullbacks, they're just much better options from an FPL point of view. Now, of course, this is Graham Potter. He might change the system game to game. It could be a back four next game, then a back five. But I think it's probably worth taking the risk if you are looking to take a bit of a punt. And these two players do have their own risks, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But let's take a look at the fixtures first of all. So this week it's Leicester away, which I guess isn't great for clean sheet odds, but the Chelsea defence is pretty decent, and there is a chance for attacking returns, especially if they're playing, like I said, in that wing-back system. In 28 it's Everton at home, which is good. In 29 they do have to play Liverpool, which isn't ideal, but it is 2 home games, and the other one is Villa at home, so I quite like that. Then it's Wolves away and Brighton at home. After that it gets a bit trickier. Man United away in 32, and if Man United beat Fulham in the FA Cup, that game will be off. And in 34 they've got Arsenal away. So I do think they're more shorter term options than longer term, although again, if he does keep playing wing backs, they are the kind of players, as long as they're fit, you can just keep in your team no matter who they're playing. But I think from 27 to 31 they look pretty good. The only thing that's worth noting is they did go through in the Champions League, so they are going to have Champions League fixtures still to come, and because of that, that is where the risks come in with rotation. And we have seen that Chilwell has not played a huge amount of minutes this season. He has got back-to-back 90 minutes in the league. He also started against Dortmund. He played 83 minutes against Southampton, so he is building his fitness up, but there might come a point where he is rested. They might go back to a back four, and Kukurea could play left back instead. So again, it's not like you just bring Chilwell in and there's no risk whatsoever. And it's a similar situation with Reece James, who was out of the squad completely for Leeds at home because of I think it was a tight hamstring. He played 90 minutes the game before that. He didn't play against Southampton. Graham Potter is obviously very cautious with him. So again, they've got the double game week in 29, but I can't sit here and tell you that Reece James and Chilwell are going to play all of these games because it's just not that likely. If I was going to go for one of them, it's kind of tricky because I think Chilwell's very, very good as a left wing back. He's often popping up in the box, but so does Reece James. And one thing that Graham Potter said recently really caught my eye, that I think it was for the retake for the penalty against Dortmund. He said it was either Havertz or Reece James, making out like Reece James is quite high up in the pecking order for penalties. Now, for what it's worth, Havertz seems to be first choice, but Graham Potter did say they'll kind of decide on the pitch. So there is a chance that Reece James at some point will take a penalty, but at the same time, it could be Havertz, right? And there were other players not on the pitch that could also be up the penalty taken order, like Mason Mount, Aubameyang, Pulisic, etc. But to be honest, most of those players aren't going to be in the team regularly apart from Mount. So I don't think it's a huge worry. So if I was going to go for one, I don't know. I didn't think about this before I answered the question. The thing I like about Chilwell is he's getting some games back to back, like, you know, 90, 90, 83. He's playing in the Champions League. Has he now proved his fitness a little bit more than Reece James? But Reece James possibly taking a penalty. I'm probably going to say James over Chilwell, but it's quite close. I like them as short-term punts, but you cannot get them in thinking they're going to play every game. There is a risk they'll miss one at some point. That is the risk you take for players like this. So just think about who you're giving up. Which defender could you have in place? And are you prepared to take that minutes risk for the potential attacking returns instead? For what it's worth, I don't have a plan right now to get them in, but in game week 29, where I was thinking about doing Gabriel to Luke Shaw, I could possibly bring in a Chelsea defender instead. So they're on my mind. I just don't know if or when I'm going to get one, but I do like both if you're open to a punt. Okay, so is Bench Boost 27 better than Bench Boost 29, considering the fixtures are easier for Brighton and Brentford and they don't play each other? Now, this is going to sound really obvious, but this is the kind of content you tune into this channel for. You should Bench Boost in the week where your bench is the best. And for most people, that's going to be game week 29 and not game week 27. Now, even if your bench in 27 was slightly worse, there are some benefits in using the Bench Boost this week in that you know all your players are fit and available and hopefully will start. In 3 weeks' time, when we get through to game week 29, there could be injuries, suspensions, bans, players might have lost their places in their team, etc. There could be a lot of things to deal with, and it might end up taking a bunch of hits just to get a bench boost out, where you might have actually been better off using it in 27. But if we're going purely off what the benches look like, for most people they will look better in 29. And the way to work this out is fairly simple. Go over to a transfer planner like on FPL.team, completely free, and just look at your benches and compare them. So yes, Brighton and Brentford do have easier fixtures in double game week 27, but because of that, I would play them over the likes of Odegaard, Gabriel and Botman. And so therefore, my realistic bench for game week 27 is Kepa, Odegaard, Gabriel, Botman. That is pretty good. That's almost bench boost worthy. But if we go on a few weeks, right, let's just say that I do end up taking Haaland out for someone like Watkins, right? I'm not going to go through that now, but let's just say I do that. Then this is my team for 28. And when we get through to 29, I would be looking to do something like Odegaard to Fernandes and maybe Gabriel to someone like Luke Shaw possibly. And so, if I'm working out my realistic bench, I would play Fernandes over Kane. I would play Luke Shaw over my Brentford defender because the fixtures are worse in game week 29. I completely agree with that. I would play Kepa over Raya, and I would play Botman with a double over Saka. So my bench in 29 is Saka at home to Leeds, Kane away to Everton, Henry and Raya for Brentford. Now, whether or not you think that's better or worse than 27 is up to you. I think that's better than 27, where there's another Arsenal midfielder on there, but it's Odegaard away instead of Saka at home. I think that Kane is better than either Gabriel or Botman in any given week. And obviously then you've got a double game week player and a double game week defender. So to go back to the question, no, for most people, bench boost 29 is better. The only reason to go in 27 is to get it out of the way. And if there are injuries later on, you're only concentrating on getting the best 11 out instead of worrying about your bench. But otherwise, comparing the two side by side, most people, it should be in 29. So I did say we'd talk about the weather later on, and there were quite a few questions that came in about this. This was one of them. Will the Leeds game be called off due to the weather on Saturday? And the reason people are worried is because that game is the first game of the double game week for Brighton. So we need it to be on. And for anyone that's not aware, there's quite a bit of snow right now in the UK and Ireland, and we just don't cope with it very well. So it's going to sound obvious, but there are two reasons a game might be called off because of snow. One is because the pitch isn't playable. Generally, that doesn't happen, especially with Premier League games. They're just fully prepared for it. So I don't think that will be an issue. The other one is if it's too dangerous for the fans to get to the ground. But from everything I'm seeing from Leeds fans this morning, they're saying it's not that difficult to get to Ellen Road. So they don't expect this match to be off. I guess from an FPL perspective, just make your decisions and transfers as late as you possibly can. If that's right up until the deadline, then happy days. Now, I guess we should do a bit of a weather report. I'm going to do my best Michael Fish impression, and most of you are not going to have a clue who I mean by that. But this is the current weather from the Met Office in the UK for Leeds, okay? So there is currently an amber and yellow warning for snow across kind of today and Friday, right? You can see it at the top, and there is quite a bit, right? But by the time we get to Friday, they are forecasting maybe the bit of the sun will come out, right? Maybe some of that snow will melt, and by the time you get to Saturday, there's not really a huge amount of forecasted snow to come. It's going to be quite cold, especially for England, right? -2, -3. But in terms of playing a football match towards the afternoon where it's like 0 or 4 degrees and there's no snow and stuff like that, it's probably going to be fine. By the looks of it, most of the snow is going to come today on Thursday and then on Friday, right? By the way, I'm not even an FPL expert, let alone a weather expert. I'm just going by what's on this website. And then you can see here's like what it's saying in words. So the headline is cold with rain, sleet or snow spreading north. So today, this is Thursday. Yes, this is what we're doing in an FPL video. A cold day with widespread frost at first, cloud spreading, blah, 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 blah. From late morning and through the afternoon, turning heavy at times. Okay, so today's not great. And then tonight, same, outbreaks of rain, sleet or snow. Friday, cold with rain, sleet or snow, easing. So it's going to start easing from Friday before we even get to Saturday. I don't think there's many issues with this being on. And I feel like we're not going to necessarily know before the deadline, but we'll have a good idea from people in leagues tweeting about what the snow looks like as to whether or not that game is going to be off. If you're completely unsure, then just go for Tony captain instead, or go for a single game weeker and just don't captain one of your Brighton players. But for me, when I look at my current team, unless there's like a real risk of it being called off, I'm just going to play it as normal. If the Leeds game does end up getting called off, then you can just choose whether or not to play your Brighton players. Maybe you'll play Odegaard over March, for example, and just captain a different double game weeker and just go from there. It'll be annoying, but it is what it is. But this doesn't look like games are going to get called off. And I think from everything I've seen from people in the UK, this seems to be the one they're most worried about, rather than like, you know, Everton versus Brentford being called off or something like that. So will it be called off? I don't know. I'm not Michael Fish. I'm not a great weather reporter. But ultimately, it doesn't look that likely. If it starts easing by Friday, they've got Friday and Saturday to kind of work through it. I suspect it'll be on. And on the end of that weather report, I'm going to end the video. If you've enjoyed it, give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll catch you again tomorrow.